So now we have another AAA game here, and unlike another ones, the way of the distribution made it totally different. The thing is that it was issued in episodic manner, means that your favorite game turns into the TV series where you play your favorite character, the world's best bold killer. And about the production process, development, and just general about the game, I give the word to Corsano, lead online programmer. Applause.
Hello, thank you for the introduction, and I would like to thank also good support at Microsoft for inviting me here and letting me actually talk a little bit about our game, Hitman. So, I'll try it with a general introduction of what we try to do with this iteration of the game, with this iteration of Hitman. I'm not sure how much I need to introduce Hitman to you guys, but let me just run a small video. It's a little bit old, it's before we released, but it kind of explains what we went through to build this game.
The essence of a sandbox game like Hitman is freedom of approach. Where you go, how you infiltrate, who you become.
Hey, you.
Knowing which disguises give you access is key.
Okay. Yeah.
But beware, some individuals are more observant than others.
Hey, who are you? Hey, look out!
Be prepared to improvise.
Where is he? You see him? Anyone? Yeah, where the hell did he go?
As you experiment with your playstyle,
We lost him.
each hit can go from bloody murder to a genuine masterpiece of assassination. Complete mastery of a level is rewarded. As your skills evolve over time, so do your options. Prepare equipment in advance and plan the perfect hit. New locations will appear over time. You will travel the world. New missions, new targets. Some targets only ever surface once, for a limited time. When they are gone forever.
All right. So, Hitman. You probably know the guy. He's that bold, cold assassin with a black suit, a red tie. And he's been around for a while. If you look at development time for the first episode, the first game, it's pretty nearly 20 years old. And there's been 6 games, so I'm going to talk mainly about the 6th one, the one that got released last year. Hitman can be described as a third-person stealth action puzzle game. And I'm intentionally trying not to put shooter in there, because in Hitman, if you start shooting, you're usually already dead, basically. It's very punishing. You need to actually explore these huge sandbox levels that we have. So we have these very extensive locations that are really deep in terms of gameplay and level design. And you will have to explore that and basically understand how they work. It's basically, each of them is a little, clockwork that you need to understand, and you need to use that to your advantage to take out your target, complete your objectives. So, Hitman is a AAA title. It's shipping on PC, PS4, and Xbox One, so it got a lot of implication on how we release it traditionally. And I'll talk a little bit of where we were coming from when we started development on this Hitman game. We came from Hitman Absolution, and I joined the company just after Absolution shipped. And Absolution had a lot of good things. It was a more modern Hitman game. It had greater playability for our gamers. It also introduced a new game engine. We had Glacier 1 before Absolution, and Absolution introduced Glacier 2, which is, you could say, an evolution, but it's such a major evolution that basically it's a new engine. It also introduced online modes as leaderboards and contracts mode. Contracts mode is interesting. It makes you part of that Hitman community by having you play the game, and save how you killed a target, so you just choose a target in a level, kill him in a certain way, and save that as a challenge for the rest of the community. So that was an interesting take on, let's say, asynchronous multiplayer on a single-player game. So for this next installment, we also looked at what didn't work with Absolution, because Absolution, from a critical perspective, was not that well received by our players. It was much more linear, it was much more story-driven, and you had a little bit of freedom than the previous Hitman game. So we wanted to go a little bit back to the roots, but still keep the good parts, keep the modern gameplay, the playability of Absolution. And obviously bring back more of that freedom of approach. So bring back these very intricate levels that you can explore and play with. And a choice that we made early on, which was kind of that controversial thing, is to deliver it in a brand new way that was not done before on that type of game. So that's what we called internally Hitman as a service. We wanted to establish the game not as a single box product, but as a living thing, so that it will ever expand, ever evolve, and that we will build iteratively upon in the future. So it had to be digital first. We had to actually not have to put it in a box to start with. We had to put it live and have it downloadable to start, which for a AAA game is a very controversial choice. We made it episodic, and a lot of people didn't understand at first why. But when you look at these huge sandbox levels that we made, there's a lot of replayability in there. And a player playing 2 hours, 3 hours might be able to complete the main mission on this level, but will miss an enormous depth of content when it does so. So yeah, shipping it episodic basically meant that a player could replay the location before moving to the next one. It also gave us an ability to listen and react to community, because Absolution was such a huge development. It was probably something around 6 years, that when it landed, basically we were kind of disconnected in some way from our core players. We didn't want to stay silent anymore. We wanted to engage with our community and continue delivering our product. We wanted also to just constantly bring on new live content, to just, we have these big locations. Let's put fun things to do on them and release it live constantly after the game is released. From a development perspective, it also means, especially for the online team, that we wanted to go into iterative development. We were no longer building a full game that will go in a box, that will develop for a few years, and that we will forget about. It will be a live, evolving product. So we took the habit of always, for a feature, putting a minimal version live and iterate on it. It also means that to support such a game, a live game, and to gain flexibility, we needed a backend, we needed a server environment to actually power the game. And as I'm lead online programmer, you probably know where I'm going. We need to basically build the server that will support our service, our game service. Extensibility for Hitman, that means that basically we want to deliver missions from the server. So if you look at any story mission or any extension mission, such as our elusive targets, which are targets that pops in the game for a limited amount of time and that you have one shot to kill, that has to be delivered from the server. We don't want that definition to be on the game right away. We will just release it for a limited period of time and have player play it. We ended up having also server-delivered menus, because if you are designing a game that will expand over time, you know that we'll get a lot of content that will emerge after a while, and you have to present that content to the player. So having the flexibility of being able to jump in at any point and rework a little bit how we present our content to the player was quite essential as well. We have game modes, as I mentioned, this target is really much online only, because again, you get a lot of constraint from the server. The core of the release target experience is that when you make your shot on that target, on that guy, when you kill that guy or complete an objective, you can't restart Never. It's server authoritative. The server won't let you restart the level. So the adrenaline at that point as a player is really pumping. You are wondering, should I take my shot now or should I restart and try to do it better? It's a very nice experience. And we have a few more coming, so if you haven't tried it yet, there's a limited amount of them. Just try the game. We have one coming in June, and that's a very nice experience for a player. So it means that we need that authoritative server. We need that server to be there and actually evaluate what the player is doing. That includes scoring. We wanted scoring to feel a bit more fair. Not sure we reached that yet, especially on PC, but at least we can fix our own mistakes as we go, potentially. Just change a little bit the scoring system, because the scoring is evaluated by the server. We wanted progression also driven by that game server, because as we have a running service, a running game, a running product, the player profile need to follow the player across all the iterations that we go through. And having that centralized was a good thing as well. Contract creation, of course, contracts mode is online. It is shared with the community. So when creating a contract, we do very little on the game side. We do a lot on the server side. We will basically look at what the player has done and basically give him option to actually enable or not conditions for his contract. So if you kill the guy with a particular disguise, we just look at how you play the game, look that you had that disguise when you kill the guy, and just allow you to make that a constraint to that contract, to that mission. When you build a backend like this, you also need supporting services. And I'll go back in detail about analytics, because that's a vital part for any game right now. We also have to deal with some authorization server, some configuration server to the player, and administrative services. But more importantly, when we build such a backend for a AAA game, we're still game developers. We are not here to build purely online tech just for the sake of building it. We want to focus on the game features. The online team at IO Interactive is really embedded within the game team. It's just not, a service team on the side. So we actually make part of the game, right? We are making these game modes and making some, you could say, meta gameplay on top of the game, especially thinking about progression and such. It means that we did not want to have to deal too much with maintaining servers and the operational side of things. We wanted it to just run as much as it could. And that's part of why we went for Microsoft Azure as our backend solution. Azure was from the start very focused on being a platform as a service provider, meaning that instead of just subscribing to having VMs that will run your own software stack, you would actually just tap into a given software stack directly. You would just talk to services and use a platform. So use SDK to actually plug into small pieces of features, some services. And it's a very big toolbox for you to build on. When we look at Azure, basically we have features in mind. We want to build a feature for our online platform. And we just have to pick the right tool to actually do it, because usually if you're adding any kind of data to the player profile, you probably have a very specific access pattern for that data that will make it efficient. And you just need to go in, look at what Azure has to offer, and just choose the right tool for the right job. Why we went with Azure on Hitman was also because it's a familiar tool set for game developers. We are in a AAA industry, so we are used to building our games in Visual Studio using C++. On G2, so on Glacier 2, on our engine, most of the tooling is also written in C#. So if you look at building the game with Visual Studio and a lot of it in C#, you see that basically your developers already have the right tool set to actually go in and help you build the backend. So it makes it very flexible within the game team. You don't have a server team that just knows their very specific skills to build the product, and a game team that is disconnected for that. You can actually mix a little bit and have people help around. So I'll talk a little bit about the architecture of what we built. This is a list of the services that we use on the Hitman backend. I obviously won't go into details for all of them. I'll focus a little bit on cloud services. It's kind of an old school service in the Azure world. Azure moves very fast, but it's what we use to actually deploy our main game logic on the cloud. We also have a lot of analytic service there, and I'll go back in details in the next section about that, because we ended up building our own analytic pipeline for this game. We have a lot of storage solution as well. So let's look a little bit at how that all plays together. For Hitman, this is not a multiplayer game. This is not a true multiplayer game when you need to have real-time feedback. You don't need a dedicated game server that will have very low latency and will have to respond within a few milliseconds. We can then use something more, supported by a whole industry, which is HTTP to talk to our server. So our game is basically using HTTPS, so encrypted HTTP, to actually talk to our backend. That backend, as you can see here, is within that cloud service model, we have different roles that we define. So one of them is a web role, the other one is a worker role. You can define way more in that if you just want to package your service together within cloud services. In our case, the game sends events to our web role. His job is just to deserialize the data, establish the HTTP connection, receive the data, and pass it on to our service, to our worker role. Then we have our worker role that basically is where our game logic sits, where we actually execute our game code, where progression is evaluated, where scoring is evaluated. The nice thing about that model is that these two have very different usage. The web role is doing very little work. It does, specialized deserialization work and passing on data, whereas the worker role is doing a lot more, intensive jobs of actually evaluating our progression. It means that these two can scale up. Obviously, this is a goal of going into something like Azure. You can just, scale it up and pay for more when you need to. And they can scale up independently. So the web role is actually scaling up and down all the time. It's a very small set, very small VMs doing very specialized job and can scale up and down all the time. The worker role is doing more work. We are trying to keep it a bit more stable. So it scale up and down less. It's also running on bigger VM size. This is a fully managed service, meaning that I'm talking about VM, but we don't actually manage this. We just deploy an application on cloud service. We deploy our web application, our service application. Talking a little bit about storage. Of course, when you build an online service, you need to store the user information somewhere. Azure comes with Azure Storage that has 3 parts, roughly. One of them is blob storage, and that's basically file storage in the cloud. So in there, we have things that also are accessed directly from the game, actually. If you look at adding a mission, so as part of that live service we have, as that live content, we add a new mission. We probably want to show an image or show localized strings there in the menu. Then the game will be able to fetch these images directly in blob storage. We also have some configuration files that we store there. The key being never to store something locally on the VM. I mean, you want your service to scale up and down. Storing anything locally on these web roles or worker role would be a terrible mistake when they go up and down. So we also use a lot of Azure table storage. Table storage is interesting because it's one of the simplest service you can think of for storage. You can only access it in one very specific way. It makes it something very specialized but very efficient to store massive amount of data. So we use it a lot for user storage, like storing progression for the game. Now, when I say using the right tool for the right job, we can also use more traditional storage solutions such as MS SQL. And obviously Azure has also SQL as a service. So we use that when we have different requirements to access our data. As I said, table storage is very simple and very specialized. But if you need to have transactional integrity, for instance, when dealing with a player inventory, you probably want to go back to traditional relational storage. Then we have some services, and one interesting one is Azure Search, which is basically drove a whole feature in the game. We shipped the game with an intention that wasn't realized because of time, that was to have a proper contract discoverability. So contracts mode is about creating content, but we want our players to be able to explore that content and load interesting contracts for them, like searching contracts where 2 people were killed wearing a certain disguise, for instance, or with a certain explosion accident or something like that. And Azure Search is exactly what you should use for that kind of thing. We didn't want to go and store that in SQL. That would make a lot of performance implication on our database. And SQL is a complex storage. It's expensive as well. So we didn't want to put that feature on there. We wanted it on something else. And Azure Search is basically search engine technology, so it's perfect for that feature. If you build any backend right now, you should look into Redis. This is a perfect toolbox. It's high performing. It's an in-memory database. And the nice thing is that Azure actually has a managed version of that. So you just boot it up, and it's persisted, it's backed up, and it's scalable. You can actually store cache on there. We also use it for leaderboards. Redis is the best thing. Just have a sorted set there that will make you a very nice real-time leaderboard. So I described a bit the architecture, but how the game is actually interacting with the server, what makes a Hitman game online right now. So it's basically event evaluation. The game is constantly sending events to the server. While you're playing, we need to know what you're doing. We need to know that to drive progression, scoring, and more. So, for instance, if you think of a Hitman game, it's about assassinating, right? It's about killing people. So just think about the kill event. It's basically the richest event we have. It will describe everything you need to know, who got killed, how we got killed, was it an accident, was it with a specific weapon, and all of that information will be available to the server. Same thing with disguise event, trespassing event. So if you are trespassing in a zone where you shouldn't be, we will know that on the server and be able to evaluate progression or rules based on that. This evaluation is driven by C# script-like little programs that we try to keep isolated from the rest of the system to keep them simple. So we are constantly evaluating events coming in on the server for the user, but then we have a bigger evaluation at the end of the session. So at the end of the session, we need to compute the score, we need to award items, award progression to the player. So we just go through the whole list of events of the session and just run some rules on there, and that will give us the progression and other output. The thing is, this is still a single-player game. You are evaluating things on the server, and that's nice and authoritative, and you can base your progression on that. You still want to provide feedback to the player. You are within the game, and something is happening on a server in the cloud, and the player wouldn't see that soon enough if you were waiting for the server to evaluate and to send back some result. So we needed a way to basically give that real-time feedback and still keep the server authoritative. So we came up with a small custom state machine definition format that will just be able to be evaluated both on the client and the server side. That means that we have one implementation in C++ on the game, one implementation in C#, all thoroughly unit tested so that they behave in the same way. And we can directly in the game, for instance, when you complete a challenge in the game, just give you feedback and pop up a new challenge that's been completed, even if the server hasn't told you that that was the case. I will go back to that little word up there that you might have noticed on the previous slide, which is Orleans. Orleans is actually a Microsoft initiative. It's from Microsoft Research. It's now an open source C# framework. And what it is, it's an actor model for .NET. So if you are familiar with language as an environment such as Erlang or Elixir, that's basically the same concept. For those of you who aren't, I'll try to sum it up by saying actors are this notion of a small, isolated, persisted process that run on a cluster. So basically, just imagine starting an actor, and then you have some sort of little program where you can have, use memory, and that will run in the isolation on your cluster. It's dynamically instantiated in Orleans. A simple example of that, when a player connects, he will just send a request to the server will automatically create an actor for that user, and in that actor we will be able to just pull in some data in memory and work on that data in memory instead of doing back and forth with the database. It's handling concurrency very well, so that's a problem when you need to scale, right? You have a lot of concurrent users, and you want to be able to scale it up and to not have too much contention between your services. And for a given actor, we basically have a guarantee of having no concurrent calls. So if you have two requests coming from the same guy, they will be queued, and you will be able to be sure that nothing basically meddles with your shared state, with your memory. So for us, each player is an actor, and that's a pretty powerful concept because it's a great way to scale. You scale based off the number of players that you have on any backend services. It just means running more actors. And running more actors on a cloud service with Orleans just means booting more worker roles, basically, that will automatically isolate our user session and handle the life cycle of these users. Meaning that after a while, if a user is disconnected, it will just reclaim that memory and that actor from the cluster. If a new user comes in, it will reallocate it somewhere on the cluster. One thing to note is that while we were building this solution with Microsoft Orleans, Azure, which is moving very fast, came up with Service Fabric and released that as a new way to interact with Azure. It's interesting because it's the same concept. It's an actor model framework, but it's fully managed. So instead of dealing with the cloud service setup, you just order a cluster of machines and it will just run your actors. So this can be web actors or stateful actors like our service worker role. In addition, I talked a little bit about the tooling on Azure, and it's good to work on cloud services, but even if we're not using it, Service Fabric seems to have way better tooling as well. So you have a better local environment to develop and test against. Going on another side of this backend technology, analytics, and I probably don't have to tell you how much analytics is a vital system right now for any game. You want to be able to extract your KPIs and know how your game is doing. We are not heavily monetized on Hitman. We're not monetized at all. We just sell episodes. We still need to know what users are playing as they're returning to the game with our live content, etc. So that's obviously something you want. Gameplay feedback is so important for us. We have these big, intricate levels, which take a lot of time and is very, level design is basically the core of Hitman. So we want to know how the players are playing it, how they are playing these big levels. And analytics gives us a way to do that. So we want also to collect that information. That clicker is weird. We want also, if we have anomalies, to be able to investigate these issues. So have analytics gives us some information about what goes wrong in the game. We build that with our own little custom assembly for the Azure services. Again, it's a toolbox. There's a lot of Azure services you can use to build an analytic pipeline. So I just described ours quickly. Our game sends metric events to a collector. That collector will just reformat it a little bit and pass it to a different Azure service, which is Event Hub. And that thing can handle a massive amount of event second if you need to. So it's basically a big fire hose of events that you can plug different services on, and on that we plug something called Stream Analytics. Stream Analytics will be able to do aggregation, quick aggregation on these events, and push that to two main destinations. We have one that is basically collecting that in big flat files, that we will process later and aggregate against. We also, by building our own system, are able to pipe some of the data back into the game in some way. Meaning, if you play in contracts, we can have trends of who is playing what, bring back to that, and use that to expose different content to the player. Now, the main part of our analytic pipeline is actually on these big flat files of data, the raw files of data that we have. And to basically aggregate that, we use something called Data Factory. So I'll just show you a little bit how that setup looks like. So this is our Data Factory setup. As you can see, it's about building your own data pipeline and just visualizing it. This is a graphical representation. There's obviously configuration that you can deploy for that. So we start with these big flat files of data, and we have a on-demand Hadoop cluster booting up every night. So basically, we pay just for what we use. We just boot up a cluster, and we will just have something just processing that data. And as you can see, it's a pretty big setup. We have a lot of output from that, of very different kind. We have a lot of small files of tabular data that is pre-aggregated after that step. So after that, these small files, we want them in a way that we can use to build reporting, for instance, to plug on Power BI or Tableau. And what we do is just we plug this in new activities that will take these small tabular files, and when they're ready, just push them to SQL storage through a stored procedure. The nice thing about the system, this is, for instance, the release target kill, so having some reporting on how our players are managing to kill our release targets. The nice thing about that system is then you get that full history of what happened and how the data was processed. So you basically build your own data pipeline, and you see your data being moved from basically service to service, being aggregated and prepared. But you can also look at what failed and potentially just look at a very specific time frame and just say, okay, that failed, I want to replace that. That makes data available to another part of the pipeline. You can just propagate your rerun through the different part of the pipeline. So that helps us a lot. So it's good to have data, but what do we do with it? How do we use it? I was mentioning to have gameplay feedback, to be able to adapt what we do based on our customer experience. And one case that we had is that we have this level in the game, which is our first tutorial level. I don't know if you played Hitman, but this is basically a very guided tutorial experience. Our game is very hard for a lot of players. It's very punishing. We know that, and we want to basically guide the players so that they feel rewarded from the first minutes of gameplay. They don't, get stuck in being killed and having to restart again and again and again. So this tutorial is important for us to guide the player in a proper way. So we looked a little bit at the data that we have been collecting, and this is basically something that we extracted from our live data. This is actually a screenshot of an interactive, in this case, a Tableau heat map. We use also Power BI more and more, but this one is on Tableau. That allows us to actually see where the player was detected, where it was spotted by the guards and NPC in our guided tutorial level. So there's a lot of points there, but you can see there's a lot of activity, like in the middle of the map. There's a little bridge, actually, if you look here. And there's a lot of people being detected there. And usually what happens in Hitman, when you get detected, you get killed. And this is where the players are killed in our map. So this is probably in the whole playthrough. But if you look at the first few minutes, you will see that a lot of them are killed actually in that area. So that was very important for us, because the player was not supposed to get killed in the first few minutes in that area. And we were wondering why. He was actually supposed to go up there. And if you see the green dot there, that's a disguise event. He's equipping a worker-engineer disguise, which is what we were trying to guide the player to, so that he can actually infiltrate through that path and get access to the boat and then continue the tutorial. So through that analytic pipeline, we were able to extract that data and detect improvements that we could make to our tutorial level. And again, Hitman is a live game, so we will actually react on this and make the game better and make it a bit easier to start with improving that tutorial experience. So, to conclude, looking back a little bit on what happened so far, we have been live for more than a year now. We started by releasing Paris, a first episode, and then we went on to release approximately one episode every month. That means, in practice, that we had more than one patch per month for the past year. So for a AAA game, that's quite unusual. It's a lot of work. It's actually a lot of process to actually get that out, especially on console. But it's been very rewarding because we really made the game better over that year. We had even more server updates. Even if you consider one update per month, you can actually live with that on the server side as well and just wait for the next one. But now we're releasing a bit less patches because we're moving on from Season 1 into future endeavor. So we will do more server updates, pure server updates. And we can do a lot just by changing the server code, the server configuration, or even the menu pages in this game. So we had live content coming out every week. So we had these big levels released every month, but we actually continued delivering live content every week, and that worked pretty nicely. We saw players coming back and back again, especially with the release target. Also because if you missed it, and I missed I think 3 of them so far, you can never play them again, and we're still not planning to release them. It's really that one-time experience that makes them valuable. So it was a great experience to see that sustained amount of activity on our game. And well, we looked at some of the learnings from that experience, and one of them was actually that Azure runs great. I mean, it might sound a little bit cheesy, but we did not have much issues with the service themselves. Of course, we focus on building the game, so we focus on building the game backend, and some of that, you know, there's always some bugs to iron out when you have a live service. But the services themselves have been running great. We didn't have that many tickets with Microsoft that we need to solve. So we had a pretty good experience from Azure. Then we also realized how much automation and process are key in that kind of endeavor. If you are going to release a live game, of course, that's true for mobile game, but in the AAA fields, it's less, you know, we have less experience in there. You need to actually go and see how you automate and how you make the process of releasing new content and release the game itself, you know, less painful or easier. And to start with, when we launched, we did not have that much automation. We did have prepared some, but it was not nearly enough. So over the course of the year, we improved that as well. We improved our process, and we're in a better place now. Operating on a live product is not the same as releasing both game. We learned that as well. When we put something out there for players, it's there forever. Basically, we can't take it back, meaning that if you had a mistake in something you released, well, you have to have a lot of work to actually correct it. So you also want a lot of QA on that. But that live product experience was very new in the AAA field. So it was kind of a cultural change that we had to go through to actually adopt that release model. I won't detail all the game improvements, but basically, if you look at Hitman as it was released in March and Hitman as it is now, it's still a lot of subtle differences all around the corners. The menu feel different, they expose a lot more content now. We also had a lot of problem with disconnection when you launch a game, or at least a lot of players were complaining about that. Actually, most of it was not directly, you know, server failures. There were some problem to run out on the servers to start with, but it was also because our client implementation was not resilient enough against small little problems, and we solved that over the course of the year a lot. So it was maybe a little bit too optimistic on the client implementation. We improved a lot contracts mode, we added contract search. As I said, we exposed more in the menu. We even added a full new difficulty mode when we released a disc in January. So, of course, when we released the disc, it just it's just the same game. We just made the game better for everyone, not only disk users. Looking forward a little bit, Hitman is now a platform. It's no longer just a box game. It is something that we built upon during the past year and will continue build on in the future time to come. And this was only season 1. So we are working on the next big releases on that. We have more live features to come. Even on season 1, we're still working a little bit on that part, and we're still striving to improve the live product. So stay tuned. More stuff is coming for Hitman, hopefully, and yeah, that was it. So if you have any question, just ask them now. Thanks.
Question, anyone? Oh, wow, people get tired, I guess. Okay, I have one for sure. So can you tell me, please, what was the reaction of the community who likes the Hitman, generally? So how did they react on the idea that now they're gonna receive game, step by step, like they're watching the TV series, let's say?
Yeah.
Were they happy, or maybe they were pissed, or maybe what was their reaction?
Well, it's simple. It is change, right? I mean, They used to just get a Hitman game as one big box product and be able to play through that as they liked, and we came up with something different.
Sure.
So initially, it was very hard to explain why we would do that, and we had a lot of negative reaction, right?
Sure.
But I think over the course of the year, when we started releasing episode after episode, and people had the chance of actually playing an episode from end to finish and replay it a little bit for a while, and then move on to the next installment, they started, realizing what we were trying to do. And I think now people are more accepting that idea and seeing the value in it, and not just, the weirdness of releasing a AAA game like that.
So what do you think? Will it be like the future of the games, or that was an experiment you probably won't repeat again?
I wouldn't say it's something you can adapt for any game, but there's certainly value in having a running game like this and just, serving your community with, constant release and new episodes. For Hitman is especially true because of the nature of our levels, right? These, as I described, are big levels with a lot of content, and you have to replay them to see the value of and have fun in them. So releasing an episode, I think, at least for Hitman, that's definitely the way to go.
And okay, seems like my question. Oh, one more? Okay, you can go there. Sweet.
Hi.
Hello?
I didn't quite get how do you launch and stop events?
So launching and stopping events, that's the question. How do we launch and stop events?
Yeah.
So the most timed event we have are release target, but we also release other game modes such as escalation and feature contract. The way we launch that is by basically uploading a new server configuration. So we just have server configuration that is along the game and will say what is available from a server side. To release content, we just upload a new definition to the server, and that makes content available. In the case of release target, it's a little bit more complicated because now we want to build a little bit of expectation. So we are actually deploying the content a bit earlier, and that puts in the menu a nice little tile with a timer to actually know when the target arrives in the location. And this is basically, we send back to the game client basically the time at which it will start, but we never send back the true information about what the contract will be. So you are teased, but even on PC, when people tend to hack around things, they can't actually play it just yet, or they don't know the exact definition of what they will have to play. And that will just land online at the exact time that the target is delivered.
Do you have some cases where you need to, I don't know, update some custom logic maybe? Yeah,
so the question, if I got it right, is do we have to update the technology, right? Do we have to update the underlying tech that we're using?
No, I mean when you have some event that have some special logic that client doesn't have. maybe.
Yeah, okay. So when you think about our events, they are coming from the client. So of course, if we want to implement a new challenge, for instance, that are server-driven, we need to tap into the events that are already in the game and generating in the game. So if we want a new challenge with a new set of events, we will have to patch the game, actually. But beyond that...
The client.
Yeah, the client, the actual bits on the hard drive of the player. But beyond that, if we can express a challenge with the events that are already there, and that usually is the case, we just have to change something on the server definition, on the server configuration, to just make more challenges available to our players.
Okay, thank you.
Don't forget to catch the stuff. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you very much. And guys, we are on the break for 10 minutes, I guess, and we'll be back.
Thanks a lot for coming.